this idea of self-reflection. Okay, you listed what you want your students to know and to be able to do. So give me an example of the way you teach, or a specific thing that you teach, or a teaching strategy you use that gets to what you want them to be able to know or be able to do. Someone have an example they want to share? You guys in the back?
One of the long-term consequences of the entire revolutionary period, life, liberty, and protection of property, or pursuit of happiness, doesn't really pan out for everyone. Not for the slaves. The colonists win their independence from Great Britain and establish a democratic republic, but they don't end slavery. And that's a problem that's going to have long-term consequences many, many years later.
So how do you teach that to your students?
Well, of course, it's a problem in American history.
Right.
One that doesn't go away, that doesn't have an easy solution. They could have abolished slavery, and of course the British actually during the war promised that. It backfired because then that inspires the slaveholders in the South to support independence.
Right. I think what I'm asking is, when you convey this information to your students, how do you lecture? Do you use some other strategy to convey this information?
Lecture.
Okay. Is there an idea of another way you could convey this information besides lecture? Another teaching strategy.
Write it on the board.
Okay. That will help with visual learners.
And I emphasize certain things.
Okay. That's very helpful for visual learners versus auditory learners. Another strategy that might convey this.
Well, I teach a few different units on slavery, and one is the Nat Turner Rebellion, and I use the Bedford St. Martin volume published by Greenberg, edited by Greenberg, on the Nat Turner Rebellion and the Confessions of Nat Turner. And then there's a really great documentary that was done. Does anybody remember what it's called? It's like Nat Turner, a problematic. I'll pull it up in my syllabus. Anyway, students love it. So between talking about the Confessions of Nat Turner and as a problematic document, because it's a problematic confession, and talking about the problems of that document, and then talking about rebellion itself, and then talking about the documentary, it's just a great way to talk about slavery.
Okay, so that's the content. How does it get to that big goal that you said you want them to be able to know and do?
The way that diversity of actors shape American history,
okay,
being one of my goals.
Yes.
I'd say that Nat Turner I would include him in that category of actors.
Do they make that connection? Because this is what you said you want your students to know.
Well, at the outset of my course, I start my semester lecturing to them about what my goals are.
Okay.
And one of them is that I want them to be able to step in the shoes of, when they're done my course, of many different people unlike themselves. And this is one of my strategies, is to be able to see the world through Nat Turner's eyes and the people around him. And no, I don't sit there and hit them over the head every class and remind them of what my learning objectives are, because they're adults, and hopefully they...
I guess that's what I'm asking, is how do you know they've got it? Go ahead.
What I try to do is, in talking about slavery and the exploitation of labor, I do try to tell them, well, where do you see instances of the exploitation of labor today?
among the worker, maybe discrimination. Where do we see exploitation, discrimination, whereby we keep people down, and as that left us? In other words, we may have ended slavery legally after the Civil War, but where it's still, I mean, certainly afterwards in the Reconstruction, again, where are they see in their neighborhoods? Do they see it in their cities, states? And I try to just, whether some people will say, well, don't businesses go and exploit the labor like in other places? I said, yeah, just right outside south here in Mexico, you know,
Right.
some from Laredo.
Okay. So you teach them the content, and then you ask them to apply the content.
Yes.
And then that proves that they got the connection.
Well, that's what I try to do.
Okay. Yeah.
Actually, one of my goals is to make them understand how historians think. And so I have a number of efforts in which we talk about how you use sources and stuff like that. So to stick on this issue of slavery,
Right.
the way I go about slavery is I set out a debate that historians have about why slave functions. And I carefully use this word function, not how it operates financially successfully, and ask them to think about paternalism as an explanation or a state of war as an explanation. And we read Frederick Douglass, or we read Harriet Jacobs, we watch a couple documentaries, and then at some point in the lecture we do a categorization, like we put paternalism, we define it, and talk about pieces of evidence that fit under the explanation of paternalism. And we think about pieces of evidence that fit under the explanation of state of war. And then there's a final exam question in which they have to choose one of these positions and demonstrate with evidence that proves them. And regularly I say, you know, there's a wrong answer to this, and the wrong answer is using the wrong evidence to prove one of these options. Neither one of these options is wrong, but you can get it wrong by choosing the wrong evidence. So I think I've modeled how historians think. I've asked them to then do it themselves, and then I have an assessment in which I can determine whether or not they've properly thought like a historian would.
Okay. So essentially, you are teaching and modeling critical thinking, which is getting to this big goal.
Yeah, one of the things like that, I just finished doing the populist and progressive period, and that's not their favorite to get into, but I use a quote from Teddy Roosevelt about how much he hates and their evil and evil revolt versus how much he's writing to Boss Platt about how much he hates the corrupt wealth of the corporations. And I have them examine that quote, and then I ask them questions about it, and they have to explain why is he opposed to Bryanism, what's wrong with populism, and what is he proposing as a progressive response to both the extremes. And they have to, it's a little worksheet they have to do. We also have a very good website that goes with our textbook, Norton's, Tyndall and Shy. And they have places on there to go and look at cartoons of different things and respond, and they can email them direct to you, or geography quizzes or whatever, that allow you to use sort of a supplemental for extra things that they don't have to do in the classroom time, but they can do it outside.
Right.
And email it.
Really, I
have a question concerning history. Why are we teaching it with this? Why does history end at 1877? Or is this a convenience for the text publishers, or why is it that there's
You mean
this
this particular course material?
Yeah, well, just history. Why is it up in this context? History, really, your point of perspective, or where you're looking at it, your view,
Yeah.
and is that ever going to be under consideration? Because
I think that's tied into the 3-credit hour system,
right, but
and that's a bigger project than what I'm prepared to take on.
I fear that it doesn't end at 1877. I fear that it ends at 1865.
Yeah.
And one of my biggest pet peeves in all of history is that they don't do Reconstruction.
Right.
And I make sure I'm bad. I do it coming and going, you know. But because I find that often I'll have history instructors, professors that will just end up with Civil War, not do Reconstruction well, and then they're not prepped in any way for Civil Rights Movement later.
Because with this movement and the end of the 1890s, then it does. I mean, once you get into
can understand failures
Should
and
be part of
successes of
1302.
Reconstruction. But yeah, that's probably one area that I delve into a lot more with my students in terms of judging it from, 1865 perspective versus, I give them this poem by Langston Hughes a little bit later that talks about, how the viewpoint of Reconstruction changed so radically, 1960s versus 1860s. But I probably do a little less. I mean, I don't ignore the institution of slavery, but I get into, basically the involvement of democracy and success and failures in terms of Reconstruction.
I think to get to the bigger issue, just after World War II, with the influx of the veterans, the universities sort of nationally decided to go to what they called the Carnegie Unit, which we here in Texas call the 3-credit-hour system. And they made an arbitrary decision when they created the surveys to divide them roughly at 1865. As years passed, they moved it to 1877.
But maybe in the context of this, maybe electrification might be or mechanization, there might be a different perspective rather
Well,
than
I know that there are some schools that have eliminated the 2 surveys and have gone to something called U.S. in a World Context and teach it all in one semester. And then I know that I've heard gossip about going to a 3-semester system. So it's just an arbitrary decision some administrator made.
It's almost hard to justify as long as you teach in Western Civic too.
That's true. Yeah, we can. Yes.
I did geography. I did one
Because history is past geography, But when my question is that when I look at the history textbooks, and when I think of the second question you have 10 years from now, what do you expect? I think that a book like Lies My Teacher Told Me can teach very good history rather than these textbooks with 500 pages thick, So I wonder, whether things like that can be possible. Yeah. Taking away the textbook monopoly and go into this kind of, you select your own some book and see, because if you take that Lies My Teacher Told Me, that has all the history you need to know as a student.
Yes. Yes. Others use sort of alternative types of things besides books and to get at those bigger goals. What you want them to remember 10 years from now.
A lot of us are flatting that out at our individual colleges as to whether we're required to have a textbook, what textbook, readers, all that other stuff. How much of a choice you get, can your bookstore handle any choices that you have? And with textbook prices rising and pressure from administration to cut down on those textbook prices, it's one giant fight. And plus, how much you want to do online, how much we can get online, all of that. I think that those are many wars to be fought at every individual college as to, rethinking our textbook and whether it's required purchase, etc.
I think that what I wanted you to get out of these 2 questions is for you to do some of the self-reflective thinking here. You say you want this thing, but are you teaching to that thing? Maybe sometimes, maybe all the time. But again, like our students, we are constantly learning, and part of that is self-reflection. We're going to have a lunch break. So officially, we will reconvene at 1, and we'll start going through the Learning Object Repository then. There are some other documents that we will go through, and you will be able to work with your partner, again, doing some self-reflective thinking about your course and how you teach it during the lunch hour. So go ahead and take a break, grab lunch.
Okay. Go ahead and just hit down or whatever you need to. All right, so Vanessa talked a little bit about the Texas Course Redesign project, and as she said, it was intended to redesign courses, first-year courses at community colleges and universities, and she picked up on that just a few minutes ago in terms of like a core curriculum set of courses as focus. They also had a bullet item or a piece in their RFP that said develop other related projects that would advance a statewide course redesign initiative. And that's where the VP for Learning Enhancement, Phil Turner, came in to call me one day, 2007, spring of 2007, I guess. He said, hey, you want to do a learning object repository for a while? Let's see if the coordinating board is interested as part of their course redesign. And so we wrote up a proposal and proposed a proof of concept idea to them. Basically, it was intended to leverage the existing courses, investment in the courses that were being redesigned in ways that might produce more reuse and repurposing. Okay, the context, as we've come to understand it over the past year and a half or so, is that the course and course content in these redesign projects are being developed by the individual project teams or individual faculty members. And what that means is there is no standard that was being set for structure of courses, logical structures of courses, and as it became clear to me and kind of the implications over the last 6 months or 8 months has been these courses are not being redesigned in the context of learning objects or their storage in a learning object repository. And we worked on that last summer as a first phase of our project, and has caused interesting issues for us, and it makes this project so much different, if not completely unique, from other learning object repositories, statewide or at institutional levels around the country. And I'm pleased about that. That's why I like doing research and development. I like handing things off after they've been, proved out to someone who wants to maintain it on a production level system. Quality of content, we didn't have to address that because all of these course redesign projects were competitively funded. And so we are making the assumption that the quality is good. And from having looked at Kelly's course, I certainly think it is of high quality. The intended audience also made it a little bit easier for us. We weren't thinking about the whole world, okay? This is not for students, okay? It is meant for instructors, faculty members, instructional designers to use in the creation and enhancement of their courses. So we had some good things going for us in terms of issues that we didn't have to deal with. Also the IP stuff, intellectual property. This stuff was all freely available, as Vanessa said, to people working in institutions of higher learning, public institutions of higher education in Texas. And similarly, the coordinating board has a line in there about the intellectual property belongs to the coordinating board. Next. So phase one phase one of this effort went from May to August in 2007, and what we produced out of that we're retrospectively calling version 1. And that was basically a proof of concept to show the coordinating board how this technology could be used to store and make accessible the contents of courses being redesigned. Shortly after we got the contract in May of 2007, there was a June 2007 call for a next set of proposals. And so I basically was writing the final report from the first phase as the proposal for the second phase of work, which they awarded us, and it started last year in September. So we're just a little over 1 year into phase 2, and this is going to have 2 versions, as I see it, of the LOR. The one that you're seeing today and which we'll be using for usability testing over the next several months and tweaking a little bit, but we're basically going to be freezing this version now and starting to work on the next version once we get usability test results and any sort of input from you. And again, that input from you is vital. I'm going to give you a lot of information that others just hitting the site is not going to have, are not going to have. And I'm hoping, it's almost like trying to run a focus group, but I'm not going to quite do that. But that feedback form, we're really interested in any sort of comments you have. It's like a 4-page form that has you asking you to show your agreement or disagreement and things like that on that 1 to 10 scale, or it's a 7-point scale. And also plenty of room for comments, okay? Including, I told my staff, because they're not happy with the existing name of this, think of a name. We can have a contest for naming the statewide learning object repository down the road. And then version 3, we expect to have out late spring in 2009. Our project ends in August of 2009, and we hope to have a near production system ready for passing off to UT Telecampus at that point. In our proposal, we had the assumption that, and from what we were looking at, that the output of the course redesign project were going to be new courses, okay? And in the literature on learning objects, we see a lot, especially in the digital environment, about the reusing of those, okay? So being able to take something that was created and using it as it exists without significant modification, okay? But also, we introduced the notion of repurposing. And I think maybe from things that you already saw with Kelly's class, why couldn't a geography class use some of those materials, the learning objects, okay? So that was also our focus, is how do we present these objects in such a way that an English teacher might pick up on something from a history class and reuse something, or some of the interactive maps that you saw or will see could easily be used in an anthropology class, okay? So that notion of repurposing, which takes it out of the context that it was originally created for and moving it into some other educational context. Some key concepts here that I'll be using this terminology for better or worse throughout the presentation. Learning object, a really generic definition in this project. There are other folks out there who have defined it much more specifically, things tied to learning objectives and must support an activity and a variety of things like that. We're keeping a very generic definition of this. Any digital resource that can support learning, okay? That's all it is to us. And the granularity, it's one of those 50-cent words that maybe a 10-cent word would do, but that's the language in the literature. We like to use what chunk of information is going to be useful, okay? What's the size of the object? Is it a full course, which could be a learning object, or is it what we now are calling assets, the smallest little primitive, say one of those flash objects that Kelly has in her course. Metadata record, I'm an associate professor in the School of Library and Information Sciences at UNT. My background is in librarianship and information science. We're talking metadata in the sense of catalog, library catalog records, things that are describing objects of interest, okay? And the world of digital information, metadata is key to helping people manage the digital resources, plus also be able to use to find it. And then metadata scheme is all the pieces of information that are collected as in one metadata record. And I'll show you examples of these as we go down. But I just want to plant the seeds of the terminology that I need to use here, or want to use this afternoon. So here, just a little bit more on metadata. Managing digital assets and digital information is a challenge, okay? We'll just leave that statement as an assertion that I think I could prove easily if I had another half an hour. But I really want to focus on the use of the metadata for the end users, for you folks that may be looking for things in the learning object repository. In the library world, we have a model that says this metadata or card catalog information, whatever term we want to use, should serve users to find things by searching on title, author, keyword, whatever, but also to then help to identify when you get a result set of 2,000 things or 5 things, what's the difference between one and the other. But most importantly, the selection. What information do you need to know about the book, article, learning object in order to say, hey, that's the one that I think I really want to look at, rather than having to click on everything and take a look and say, oh, that's not what I thought it was going to be. Whether it's in terms, in this case, in this environment, typical learning time, difficulty, interactivity type, format of object, level of object, intended audience, whatever it might be. The metadata can provide that information for you to quickly see, no, that's not going to work for my class. And then being able to access or acquire it. In this case, you can view the things in the repository, and you can also download them and put them in your learning management system. And with the metadata information, we can provide different displays of it. Okay, so brief information, more information, the full metadata information that's associated with an object. Another key concept is the digital repository. In this case, we're using something called DSpace, open source software product from MIT, created by MIT and Hewlett-Packard. It's a place that stores the digital resources and the metadata that describe them and allows users to search and retrieve and browse and navigate through that. So it's basically a database that has a bunch of information as well as the assets in it and functions of information retrieval or search that it allows. And so we do provide the user interface, public user interface that you'll see demonstrated that allows those activities to go on. Okay? So phase one, quickly through this, we had a bunch of questions that we were going to address and demonstrate to the coordinating board. So we assumed that the courses that were being redesigned were going to be complete courses, and we had to figure out a way to achieve our purposes of repurposing and reusing to decompose those, break them apart, okay, into separate, smaller objects. Obviously, all that digital information that's in Kelly's course are a set of files, okay? But you couldn't just decompose at the file level because that doesn't make any sense. I wasn't going to spend a lot of time creating metadata records for the JPEG images that she had chosen, okay? That didn't seem to be worthwhile. But to decompose it at the content, the asset level, like those flash animation things, those have a lot of value, and we take the time to describe those. But we had to figure out, do we do a topic level decomposition, a unit level, lesson level? How do we do this? We also had to come up with the right kind of metadata. You probably want to know, how long will students spend on average on this object, on this lesson, on this topic, whatever. Is it easy or is it difficult? Is it highly interactive? Is it non-interactive? You know, those sorts of things that we could represent specifically for this set of objects through the metadata. And then how are the users going to interact with this? How would you guys interact with it? We had to make assumptions about that in phase one. And then for the reuse, how could you take the stuff out of that repository and push it into your learning management system, whether it's Blackboard, Sakai, WebCT, whatever you might be using, okay? So in this first phase that we did in about 4 months, we implemented the repository, developed the metadata scheme, configured it, the repository for the kinds of searching that we needed, decomposed Kelly's course from last summer, and then submitted all those into the repository, packaged up some of those into a file format that would allow easy ingest into your learning management system, and then we did some testing and verification. You'll see up here, and I'll highlight it a little bit later, we didn't talk to users. Okay? We only had 4 months to do this project. We made assumptions just to get the proof of concept out there. Okay? And we made some okay assumptions, as it turned out that we did some user testing at the end that people were quite pleased by what they saw. But that was not a focus of phase one. Now, the test data for phase one, last summer's demonstration implementation, was Kelly's course, U.S. History 1, as it existed last summer. And it is structured into units, lessons, topics, and then we call them freestanding learning objects last year. We've changed that term to asset now. But these are the flash files, the interactive glossary things that they have in there. She also had case studies that doesn't fit nicely into that structural hierarchy from large to small. And also she had some supplemental information that was going to be developed, teacher and student guides. So that's the kind of material that we had to work with. But we basically took these top 4 and said, that's going to be our way of chunking out the granularity levels, the chunks of information, units being the highest, biggest piece outside of the course, then lessons, then topics, and freestanding learning objects. And I have a link, I think, on that sheet to the version 1 repository, and it's also linked on the on our version 2 repository if you want to go back and look to see what we think how ugly it looked last year. But our interest was not in a neat interface at that point. We wanted to show the functionality. Vanessa? Then the other thing that we did was to try to figure out how to package up the learning objects to make it easy to pull into a learning management system if that's what you're using. And there are 2 specifications out there. There's SCORM, many of you might have heard about that, and then IMS content packaging specs. Both cases, it ends up as a zip file that you can, and I'll show you how I can load one of those from our repository into our Blackboard system. But I assumed that all those specs had been worked out and all the LMSs were conformant to the specs, and that turned out not to be true. Why should I have been so naive, having worked in technical standards and conformance issues for years? But anyway, it does work with Blackboard, and I can show you that this afternoon. So, next. Then at the end, in late August, as we were finishing up the tech part of it, and with the content we had, we did 2 types of assessments. We had laid out what the functional requirements and technical requirements were for our phase 1 without user input, okay, just our good understanding of how some things work. And we checked all the things that were working and not working in phase 1 implementation against this in the system level assessment. Then we brought in a number of history folks, students and teachers last summer, to actually work through some scenarios of tasks of looking for things in the repositories, from simple tasks to more complex tasks. And it was not a usability test in any way, because we hadn't done anything with the interface to make it look nice, but it at least allowed us to get some answers to questions like, could you develop a mental model quickly of how this thing works? And they said yes. Okay. And in one person said, boy, I wish our UNT library catalog was as easy to use as this. Okay. Made me feel good. I poke my librarian friends quite often with that remark. So next. But we ended up with more questions than we answered. Okay. So we, as moving into phase 2, we needed to know further, how quickly can users develop mental models of an LOR? How widely can all of you quickly get a sense of this? I don't believe in help pages. I don't think most users, look at yourself, think of your students, are going to look at the help pages to figure out how to use an application. If the information isn't right there on the page to help you move through, game over. If it takes a lot of training, game over. Okay, that's my kind of philosophy. What levels of granularity? What's the right size to be most effective for people? How will users search and browse? We've gotten some information this spring through some focus groups on that, and we've implemented some of that. What information do you need to see about a learning object to know if it's going to be helpful to you or not? Vanessa? And one of the key things is confirming that other redesigned courses structure is not going to look anything like Kelly's. Okay? We're working right now with community college here in Austin doing a Spanish class, Texas Tech doing a Spanish class. The structure look entirely different between those in the same discipline. Okay? We're looking at working with UTEP down in El Paso on a developmental writing workshop course. And again, completely different structures. And that causes challenges mostly for you all, not so much for us, except in that we have to make it understandable to the users, all the users of our system. You will, I think, prefer some sort of consistent arrangement of things in a web environment like this, rather than, oh, this course is weirdly structured like this, and this course is weirdly structured like this, and you'd like to see some consistency. So our job has been, how can we model kind of the abstract model of these courses to fit all of them into that without losing any of the idiosyncratic pieces of those courses. And then what function should be available to serve you guys best, okay? One that I'd like to implement soon with this version 2, maybe not in the repository, but down the road probably, is some way of building communities of practice, okay? So people having ways to talk to each other using the content. But for right now, I want to find out from people that go and point their browser at this thing to, were you successful? What do you say needs to be improved? Did you find errors in it? And things like that. Just feedback mechanisms for the time being. Okay? So we were pleased with what we did in 4 months. The coordinating board seemed pleased when we showed it to them in October last year. But some of the major conclusions was how we label things in the repository is probably going to make the biggest difference in user satisfaction. How do we label pieces of information? How do we label the size of the object? We also know that different disciplines are going to have different vocabularies that they use for talking about what is this thing about. Is this about, parts of speech versus chronological events? They're going to be different in that way as well. We need to provide a range of access methods and navigation structures in the repository, and then the high quality of the content is really absolutely essential so that you get repeat users of it, okay? Critical mass of that as well. Yes?
But like a Wikipedia where you have people doing associations and logging into key terms and that kind of build on itself.
It's been one of our considerations as to, we call it in our field, user tagging, user-generated content, And I think that may be very helpful for them to say, oh, I really found this useful, or, any sort of feedback on that could be part of the metadata record that others could see.
Yeah, but I mean, just like at least the tag where somebody else has used it, okay, this was excellent for anthropology, yada, yada, yada.
Right, and I think more and more as we get used to the Web 2.0, Web 3.0 sorts of technology, people will come to expect that, So yes, I would like to. Okay, I would like to see how that would work in here. So, okay, Vanessa. So phase 2 started last September, which is basically research and development. We want to produce a near production system, all the wrinkles out for a fully usable system that we'll hand off. We should have somewhere between 5 and 6 courses populating the repository at that time. And in part, what we're doing right now and have been doing for the last 6 months or so is identifying user requirements. We've run a series of focus groups, community college instructors, faculty members, and others from various disciplines that we will have representative course content in the repository. That's been very useful to us in terms of getting an understanding and their reactions to this. We're using, that's okay. We're using newer technology application than we did last year, especially in terms of the interface design work. We will be starting usability testing on this in November on this version, and that should be very useful to give us more information. All of this pushing towards what we need to revise and refine for our next version. And we'll also be addressing intellectual property and licensing issues, because outside of you all that have free access to this, other people are likely to want this, okay? And then there's issues like, well, what happens if you download one of these, add some modifications, enhance it, and want to put it back up? Who owns the IP rights at that point, all right? There's a co-authorship. So we get into that messy, nasty stuff about IP. And wouldn't it be nice if everything was free, okay? But that ain't going to happen. Next one. So assumptions that we made going into phase 2 based on phase 1. Again, some of this is repeated. Users may be in need of different sized objects. There's no common logical structures to any of these courses. The way people label things, you call it a lesson, you call it a topic, you call it a unit, I call it something else, a module, all right? So within the courses, the labeling is not consistent, and I think for the user's sake, we need to try to standardize that. So when people say lesson, okay, this is what we mean by it. Different courses will have different levels of granularity because they're producing chunks of stuff that may not be an entire unit, at least in our logical scheme. And then some for some objects, like in Kelly's class, the topic level really needs some context often, all right? It needs to be in the context of the lesson, possibly. But some of her assets, you know, they stand alone, all right? They don't need necessarily any context as to what topic they're embedded in. Okay, next. We find that the way users engage looking for things, whether it's information or objects, their information-seeking behaviors, how they look for stuff, are very complex. And it's hard to model that in advance. All we can do is try things out, listen to them, try more things out, do usability testing, and keep refining what we offer for the majority of users that satisfy their needs. How different people in different disciplines will come at searching for things in the repository, I think, is a major question. And then back to the metadata, what information should be offered, presented that's appropriate. So talking with the Spanish folks that are designing, or the folks designing the 2 Spanish classes, we need metadata elements that talk about parts of speech. Okay, it's a given, all right? Not everybody's going to need that information. Kelly's class, that wouldn't have meanings as it does in the foreign language classes. So we need to be able to need to customize metadata for specific disciplines, and yet have a standard baseline that everybody uses and can understand as they go across it. There was talk last fall with the coordinating board about the use of learning objectives, okay, to attach with the learning objects. And it seemed like a really good idea back then. We ran the focus groups this spring. They said, no, that's not going to be helpful to me. And then talking to people at a major conference on learning stuff last summer in August, and it was clear that trying to tie learning objectives, especially back to an asset level, a small flash animation thing, it's not going to work. And then Kelly had laid out objectives at the unit level, I think, and that made sense for the unit. But as we bust it apart into lesson and topics, then that becomes really hard. So I don't think we're going to attempt this at this point in my life anyway. Next. So how do we organize this stuff then? What are you going to see as we look at the repository? We decided we'd go discipline, subdiscipline, courses, and then the collections of objects for a course at the various levels of granularity. So, for example, we have history, U.S. History 1 and 2 will be in there, okay? And it's a hierarchy that's presented. And then we can go on to the next slide, please. And here's what you'll see that actualized in one of the pages on the repository. So, as you see, we have units, lessons, topics, assets, supplemental course content that doesn't fit into that hierarchy. And then down here for the Spanish grammar, lessons, topics, and assets. They don't have something that's equivalent to a unit, all right? Because this was not a full course. This is a set of modular podcasts dealing with particular topics, okay? So logically, it couldn't be, aggregated as at a level of what we consider units, okay? So again, showing that different courses are going to have different chunks of information in different sizes. Okay, Vanessa? How do we represent those sizes? Okay, we're using numbers right now in the metadata, and this comes out of the standard developed by the IEEE of all people, International Electrical Engineering, blah, blah, blah. I forget what IEEE stands for. But they came up with this learning object metadata scheme about 10 years ago. And they were very focused on supporting educational and content for training. And they came up with this notion of an aggregation level, thing about granularity. And they used 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Well, that's really intuitive, What does it mean? So what we're going to do, and I thought I'd be able to display it today, but we ran into a little bit of problems. We'll see if this works out in usability testing. We're going to use icons next to each of the objects as they come up to try to indicate, is it at level 1, which is the smallest piece, level 2 has 2 white blocks, level 3, and then finally level 5, which is an entire course. we'll see if that helps to organize, what it is. And if you go to the next slide, we can show you for each course then, we'll have this kind of a map on the course page that lays out what is in that particular course. Okay, so Kelly's has 4 levels, and then the 0 level is that other supplementary material, and then we give some indications and labels here, some indication of what's in each of those. And if you go to the next one, what we call this is based on something I read this summer, the Russian doll approach. As soon as I saw that, it's like, it's obvious, that's what we're doing. You know, the Russian doll, you take the hat off, and then you pull out a smaller and smaller until you get down to the last thing. So, and this is a quote from this person, Mackin, they're all created at different levels, okay? So you can have a learning object at the asset level all the way to the course level. So this is a nice metaphor that if we can find a nice visual image to go along with this, I think it'd be fun. Yes? I'm sorry? I don't know what that one is. Oh, okay. 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 Write that on the comment sheet, okay? Just so I don't forget it. Okay, next. And then ways that we're using now to answer some of those questions that we had. How are we going to find things in here? Well, currently you can browse, okay? You can browse by titles, subjects, authors, media formats, date created, and you can do that at the entire repository level, or you can do it down to the collection level, or the course level, I should say. And then how about searching? We have the ability to customize both browse and searching. The advanced search is title, keyword, title, summary, and subject, okay? The basic simple search box is just keyword across all the materials, all the textual materials anyway. We're keeping it simple for now because if we add a lot of complexity, typically the library catalogs, seldom are those advanced searches used in any powerful way. So we're going on a basic kind of search here, give some opportunity for advanced searching. Next. Then to help in those kind of broader searches, you can sort the results by course name, date created, size of object, title, author affiliation, and then order them by either ascending or descending in terms of alphanumeric order. But these are things that came out of our focus groups. Had somebody from economics, someone from chemistry, and someone from one other discipline, one focus group. And the example came up as, I want to do a search for linear, okay, the term linear. Well, that means something different in economics than it does in, say, physics, okay? And so they said, you need to contextualize the results back. So that's why we provide the course name in the result, in the brief metadata description. So you at least see, okay, this is not something, if I'm an economics person, that I probably would go to first, because if it's a history class where the term linear is used. And there's other ways that we contextualize it, and through our usability testing, I expect we'll get some suggestions on doing that. Size of object again, what level of granularity is it? Okay, next. And then finally the metadata. So we have how do you find the stuff, and then how do you use what you see in order to make some decisions. We have one metadata record. It could have up to about 40 pieces of information in it, 40 different elements, okay, or fields. And from that, we generate several different views of it. Right now, we have 3 views. We have results from a search and a browse. That somehow the magic was happening last night, and that got duplicated. Results from search and browse, a simple item record, and a full item record. And we'll see that in the demo. So when you do a search or a browse, you're going to see results come back looking like this. The title, a quick summary, what course it's in, who's the author affiliation. This is for kind of giving a sense of a credit as well as authoritativeness, and then when it was created. Right now, everything that's in the repository was created in 2008. Okay? But as this goes forward, Kelly may revise some of her material, and it has an updated date. Okay? So that's the briefest representation or view of the metadata record. And since it's at a lesson level, this little icon will be there to say, here you are in terms of the course structure. Okay? Make a note, if you would, when you're putting your comments in. Does that work for you? Maybe this is too obscure at this point, but at some point we need to know if that works or if we need to go a different direction. Okay, I think there's one or two more slides is all. So this is the next view. This is the simple item view. We have the title. We actually give the author as well as the affiliation now. The summary, which is the same. Subject terms. What terms represent the topics that are covered in this particular lesson? And remember, a lesson consists of 2 or more topics. Okay. Course name. What media formats are included? Web page, animation, text, image. What kind of object, learning object is it? An illustration, a map, a lesson, day created. And then this IMS content package link, say, oh, I'll view this and I really like it. You go back and say, download the IMS content package. I want to pull this one right into my learning object management system or open it up to play with the pieces of it. Okay? So trying to figure out, getting people to the right kind of thing once they found what they think is going to be useful for them. So I think this has great potential. I also think that we're in danger of we will build it and you guys will come. Okay? And one of my doctoral students, well, actually 2 of them are going to be working on dissertation research related to the use of learning object repositories. What are going to be the barriers or challenges for people to use this stuff or reuse the content? This conference I was at this summer, there was a 2-hour workshop, about the same number of people that's in this room. And the workshop was framed as if the best instructional designers got together with the best faculty or instructors, domain experts, to create the best course on X, Y, or Z, would you use it? Okay? So that's kind of where we are with the learning object repository and the course redesign. We have lots of good content produced in very good pedagogical styles. It's going to be freely available. Will it work for you? Will you reuse it? And I think that that's a question we need to address as soon as possible to start figuring out what do we need to do in the redesign of the LOR to minimize any barriers to use that can happen. Okay? If they're emotional, political, or institutional barriers, we may not be able to deal with those. Okay? But if it's personal choices like, well, I could do something just as well. Why should I use somebody else's stuff? Or that doesn't fit my way of teaching, even though it's good content. And if the material isn't easily customizable, the person will go off and do their own course. I don't think we have enough money in the world for everybody to do all things themselves when there are good quality content, commercial and or freely available. That was an editorial, okay? I hope you took it as that. But what we can do is evolve the LOR as a system to be more effective and better serve you if we get input from you and we listen to you, which I'm pretty good about doing, I think, in terms of users, and also if we develop a critical mass of instructional material that's available there. So it becomes really a place that you go first rather than, searching Google to say, is there something out there I could use for my class today? Yes?
What's going to be the criteria for including stuff?
Right now.
Can we ask to contribute stuff, or can you develop something? Not that I have, but in the future, if I develop something, could I submit it? Or what? I mean, how is
I think Vanessa wants to answer that.
Actually, right now, we're using the course redesign materials. However, as we work with the telecampus for the statewide expansion of this, one of the very first things that we're doing with the telecampus is creating a peer review system. And once that peer review system is in place, we will present a call out to folks to ask if they have content that they would like to be included, and we will run it through a peer review process. Our goal is to make sure that that peer review process, as much as possible, mirrors the peer review process that's used for scholarly publications. And that's, as I said earlier, twofold. One is to ensure the quality of the learning objects, but also to assist faculty in being able to use those materials as they would publications for promotion and tenure.
Vanessa will continue to focus on the core curriculum.
Originally and initially, we'll be looking at the core curriculum because that's what the course redesigns have been. We hope that as we develop this further, we'll be able to look at including non-core curriculum content. One of the reasons why we're partnering with the University of Texas Telecampus is the University of Texas Health Science Institutions and Medical School are actually creating a medical learning object repository. And they approached us and said, hey, would you like to partner here because we're going to create this medical learning objects repository. We know that you guys are already developing something and that UNT has done great work. Maybe we can join our limited financial resources and be able to develop an infrastructure that would allow for two distinct repositories in it rather than having to reinvent the wheel. We think that by the time this thing is done, in 2 or 3 years, we know we'll have two distinct repositories in the general skin. One will be the undergraduate learning objects repository. One will be the medical learning objects repository. We suspect that there will be ways, though, of creating other types of repositories down the road. One of the things that we're looking at is, as some of you may know, the coordinating board has also funded several professional development module projects. We have 3 that are in development right now. College Mathematics, which the University of North Texas is doing. University of Texas at El Paso is doing one on reading comprehension. And then the University of Texas at Austin are doing 2, one on foreign language acquisition and instruction and one on critical thinking. Those are all going to, and then we have an RFP that many of your institutions have actually put a letter of intent in to create a set of professional development modules for faculty on hybrid and online teaching. Our goal with those materials are to create readily available professional development activities for faculty around the state. We think that eventually those may also live in the Learning Objects Repository. So right now, we're focusing on the general ed core curriculum because that's where the course redesign focused. We are hoping that as we get that seated, we'll be able to expand that to undergraduate education and then potentially maybe even expand it to graduate education with some smaller repositories like we're doing, like the University of Texas system is doing with the medical objects repository. The key with anything that's going to go into the undergraduate portion is those materials, particularly the course redesign materials, as a part of the contract with those projects, those materials must be made available to faculty at Texas institutions of higher education for free. And that is something we will continue to be strongly, strongly committed to. The idea is that if it's at a public higher ed institution, if you're a faculty, whether it's teaching at a university or a community college or a technical college, if it's a public institution in Texas, you're going to have access to this material to be able to use it for free. It's state dollars that paid for the development of it. It's to be tools in your toolbox for your use as you deem fit. And that will be the case with any other materials that go in. Now, we will be working with the telecampus to look at how we might make these things available to private institutions for a nominal fee, or how we might make these things available to other states for a nominal fee. But if you're here in Texas and you teach at one of our public higher education institutions, you're going to have access to this material. And like I said, we're starting with general ed. We've started with U.S. History 1 because that was the one that was most developed, and it was easy for Bill's group to work with Kelly and her group. There's Kelly. We're working right now with materials for Spanish, developmental English, and we hope to have those materials seated in the repository this spring. We're hoping to actually repeat this sort of workshop, but with Spanish later this spring. And then we've got material that's being developed right now in biology, chemistry, engineering, intro to humanities, English composition 1 and 2, college algebra, developmental math, elementary statistics, developmental English, both reading and writing, U.S. history 2, in Spanish, about the only courses we don't have under development right now are American government and Texas government. I think those are the only two of the core curriculum courses that will not end up being redesigned by the time all 4 phases are done. So does that answer your question and your question? And again, I do really want to stress, and this is something that's been really important in all of our discussions so far, as we open this up for faculty to submit material that were not part of the course redesign grant, we want them to go through a peer review system, not only so we can make sure we're dealing with intellectual property issues and all of that fun stuff, not only so that we can ensure quality of content, because this content doesn't do any good if it's not quality content, but and I feel this very strongly as an ex-faculty member, and I know the folks at the telecampus, Rob Robertson, who's the director, Darcy Hardy, who's the executive director, feel this very strongly as well. We want faculty to be able, as much as possible, to get use out of the development of these materials in the promotion and the tenure process. It's a type of scholarship. It's the scholarship of teaching. And the only way I know to be able to help that happen, I can't make it happen, but the only way I know to be able to help it happen is to make sure that we've got a peer review system that is as rigorous and mirrors a scholarly peer review system that you would have with, getting an article in the Journal of Southern History, or the Journal of American History, or the American Historical Review.
Okay. Credits to my wonderful research team at UNT. Almost all are PhD students. One master's student from information science who's a graduate and continues to work with us, and one master's student from computer science, and a great young BA graduate from May who's doing our visual interface design. So, and I just have to, and this is all on your PowerPoint handout, just have to credit there for our Texas Center, and feel free to contact me. You have that information there now. The problem I'm going to face is that the cord is not long enough to show interaction, so I'm going to have to be sitting down to do stuff. Unfortunately, I can't. I didn't have a script for Vanessa to walk through the repository, but I'll start up here just a little bit. We think, kind of following up on what Vanessa said, this is entirely extensible. I would like to see what we've done, not for personal benefit or anything like that, but that this is a foundation of the statewide learning object repository, and that we steward our state resources well, not to be having a number of people going off and doing a separate repository infrastructure or repository set for different collections of materials, okay, that have some logical coherence. And what we can do here, and I'm sorry I can't look at you, but I won't be able to keep your faces in sight here while I'm back here, but we can have, label this the Learning Object Repository of Texas, and come down here, and instead of saying go to the Course Redesign repository or collection, we'd have go to the medical object repository, whatever. We can lay all that stuff out so you have one presence for all the good stuff that's coming out of the instructors and faculty members in Texas. So let's go into this and take a little bit of a look. This is our new design homepage. We've written some stuff in that middle landing page there to indicate where version 2 fits into this project, what the project is about. There's links to the version 1 system here, and there's also a link down here, which are not hot at this point, to our project website that have other background materials on it. The site is structured, as I said, by disciplines and subdisciplines. by disciplines and subdisciplines. We have placeholders in there for English and math and science, hoping those courses will be providing this content sometime next year. And so then we have the history and Spanish classes that we do have content in here for now. And you see the way we've structured the 4 levels in the granularity, case studies, the content packages for easy downloading and ingestion into your LMS. And we just started working with the Spanish stuff about 2 weeks ago, I guess. And that will be being refined as we go forward. So let's just, you can browse or search. If I do a search here on verbs, oops, and all of a sudden I start seeing things, you know, reflexive verbs, stem changers, all that from the Spanish class. I don't know if Kelly uses the word verb in any of her learning materials, but if so, it would show up here because it's just doing a, you know, match of the word verb to whatever thing is in the metadata or the full text of the objects in there. And here's where I can, you know, sort by relevance, by size of object. If I do that, I might get a little bit different listing. Reflexive verbs were first up here before. Now we get a lesson level object. And that's where that image, that icon, what's going on here? Where that icon would go here to say, oh, this is a bigger piece, this is a smaller piece. At the bottom, in this order, would be the smallest chunks, which are in this case for the Spanish class podcasts. So what we were delivered by the Spanish instructor, creator of this, was a logical chunk that included an HTML page and a podcast. Okay, we separated the podcast out as an asset by itself. Okay, and then the HTML page and the podcast were at the lesson level, I think. But the data are there in that order from highest to lowest, biggest piece to smallest piece. We go back here to the repository home. You can start browsing the entire repository, which right now encompasses these 2 classes, and pick. Say you're looking for something on Civil War. Well, that might be down here someplace. Might have to go to the next. Let's see. There was Civil War strategies. Okay, maybe that's not what you were looking for, but at least you found something on the Civil War there. You can also do browse by subject terms. This is out of a particular metadata field. So you're just looking at the terms that have been assigned, saying this thing is about this. Okay. So if we scroll down here, or let's go look at the Civil War. Oops. And there's a lot of subject terms in here. Civil War. Okay. And we find 33 items in the repository on the Civil War. If I look at course name, I'm doubtful if the Spanish course has anything on the Civil War, but who knows? And that would be one way of seeing if what courses they come out of. But most of this will be coming out of the history course as indicated here. Okay? And similar, you can browse by media formats. There's a limited number of labels we're using here. Let's choose animation. And it's a good place to start, maybe. This is the advice of Mrs. Isabel Mary Beaton. This interactive displays Mrs. Beaton's advice on household management. Okay. The next thing you see after you click on that title is the second level of metadata elements. Okay. Sure, we could take you directly to the object, but we're assuming that you might like to know some other information about it. Maybe not. That's what usability testing is going to indicate to us. Then we can open it, and okay, that's her interactive flash for this particular thing. Okay. Oops. So there's multiple ways to navigate through the collections and the content. We also offer an advanced search, as I said before. You can search the full text, the summary, the title, the subject, and it's going to bring you back, X number of results that fit your search criteria. So let me search in the summary about Civil War. And I'm going to sort it by learning object size again. Okay, and we got 47 there because we looked at Civil War from one perspective. It doesn't necessarily mean that's the only things that were from that result set. I'm not sure why we have 47 here and 33 in the other one, but there must be some reason that I won't speculate on right now. And again, then you just simply go through, and this is at a unit level now. And if we look at the unit level, we see all of Unit 1 that you can preview, navigate through. This is not sitting on Kelly's site. This is sitting inside the repository, okay? Go back. I guess I could use the navigation here. So at these higher levels of granularity, we are using navigational structures to see and preview those things. And what will happen is you don't want to download at this point, okay, because you're not going to get all of the files that are associated with this learning object. That's where you go to the IMS package or the SCORM package, download that to ingest into your learning management system. And I'll demonstrate that in just a bit. Oops. Yes. No, because the SCORM package and the IMS package are basically zip files that pull all the stuff together, including things that SCORM or IMS needs to load it into your learning management system. But all the content files related to this are there for you to say, oh, let me pull that one out, do some editing on it, put it in a different sequence or anything like that. So that's going to be our most efficient way, I think, of providing download of this stuff and the most flexible way for people to have access to all the files here. I'm not sure. I am going to log in here just to show you a little bit of what I mean when I say all the files. No. Oh, to do what I'm doing? Up till now, no. You can just come in there and you can see everything and do everything that I've just been doing. I'll show you the reason to register for an account in a second. But as I was talking about I just want to make sure everyone understands. Oh, why did they do this to me? Maybe I'm not this person here. Let me try myself as a different person. I have too many names, yes. Yeah. It's not letting me log in. I don't know if you have an account on this one. I'll just skip that for now. So, okay. Okay, so
And these, these issues of what happens if a faculty member adapts and changes, and to what extent is it adapted and changed, and do those adaptions and changes go back into the repository? These are actually all a set of issues that we're going to be working with the UT Telecampus as we do the expansion to create policies governing them. And these sorts of intellectual property issues I'm the first to admit, are way beyond this little historian's understanding, and we're going to be bringing in some of the experts from around the state and actually from around the nation to sit down and help us map out what are appropriate policies for these very situations. We're not quite there yet, but we're going to be there. I have great faith, Terry, that we will be there in another year, because that's actually part of the very first year of work that we're doing on the expansion of the project, is to get that sort of set of policies in place. And that's one reason, too, why we're starting with the redesign, the course redesign objects, because the contract that we have with our projects actually gives the state of Texas the intellectual copyright. So that makes it easier for us to work with that set of materials first, and then we can develop the policies to deal with materials that come in.
okay, and just to move along to these collections, which we call collections in here, which are basically groupings of things of like size. And so once you get into a collection like this, then you can do the search and browse just within that, just looking for the topic level stuff or the lesson level stuff or the asset level stuff. And again, because all this stuff has been recently loaded, it just shows up here. And what you get, again, in each of these second views is a little bit more information, and then you can preview what's there. And that's the actual content with the images embedded. And if there happens to be, and I don't know if there is in this one, roll over different second. Okay. So that kind of interactivity is still maintained in the topic level object once you go to preview it. Okay, and I guess this is a fairly long one. And let's see if this History Network News, is that what it's called, Kelly? HNN? History News Network. Yep. Now, I'm not sure why. We might have a slow network connection here for that HNN. Okay, really? Okay, I'll check on that. Please make a note on that on your comment sheet so I can have my staff take a look at it. The transcript is there available as a document. And so this topic level object is fairly rich in content and interactivity, but it's all there for you to look at to say, once hopefully the metadata serves to get you there, and you don't have to have a lot of false starts saying, I didn't think that's what that was going to be, or yeah, that looks exactly like what I want, and I want to download it. But instead of downloading it, you would download the content, the SCORM package or the IMS package. And in this one, we've not created either of those yet. Let me show you then sorry, I need to sit down here to see this better. What I mean then by the IMS content package, for about 6 or how many are there? 7 items. We actually created IMS content packages for lesson, topic level stuff, and even a unit level thing. And to demonstrate how you can take that content, the complex objects, and put them into a standard format to ingest into your learning management system, or, as Kelly said, just download it to your desktop, unzip it, and use the files that are in there. So let's see. Let's take this one. And I'm going to save this now to my disk. And we'll have better instructions about the downloading part as we move forward. And this one's called 1.2 zip. Okay, so now I've downloaded on my computer. I could go here and I can see the files that are in there. All right, so if I wanted to extract them and then play with them, that would be fine. But instead, I'm going to go to my Blackboard site and actually, let's take a quick look of what Lesson 2, Topic 1 is. So we have these 2 collections. We have the collections of the learning objects themselves. Then we have a collection of the IMS associated content packages. We're not repeating all the metadata here to describe that. Instead, we just give a link back over to the object, okay? And in this case, here's the IMS content package ID that would take you back over to download it, all right? And this is one topic within Lesson 1, I'm sorry. And it has some things in it. Oops. Wrong tab, sorry. So we use Blackboard at UNT. I probably need to instead of getting frustrated, I'll log in again because it's probably timed me out. And I'll go into this course. And I go into build, and it says SCORM, and I'm going to create a SCORM module, called Test 3. Oops. Sorry. Oh, I remember. I need to upload that file. From my computer, from my desktop. History 1.2. Okay, it's importing it. Seems like that's a success. And I now go look into my learning objects or learning modules. This is what I just uploaded. And it's going to take that IMS, unpackage it, unbundle it, and have all the pieces that was in the learning object, including the interactive map, and that's still working. So it's a way of, using a standard spec, bundling the courses files together, creates a zip file, and it's either going to be SCORM or IMS. You ingest it in the LMS systems that support that type of spec is able to unbundle it and make it present just as a learning module in the class. Okay? Actually, it does, but it doesn't claim to. Okay, I think it claims to support SCORM. Okay, but I was successful getting IMS to open here. The ones that we had problems with last year, and I'm sure they all fixed their problems by now, right? Angel was the best. We had no problems throwing anything at Angel, and it handled it no matter what. My biggest disappointment was Sakai, because I had run a test implementation of Sakai a couple years ago. It exports IMS content packages, but the version that I was working with 2 years ago couldn't ingest it back in, which was a real disappointment. Desire to learn, not at all. The WebCT Vista product before Blackboard, sort of. A lot of errors with that. And I was just shocked. Well, I shouldn't have been shocked, but I was shocked that they weren't further along in their support for IMS content packages, since it is a community-wide and almost industry-wide standard like SCORM is. Okay, but this is, to me, a real goal of this project is to make it easy for you to get these complex objects where there's, in some cases, like the case study, 70, 80, 90, 100 files that we have to bundle together because there's no way to easily download that from, say, Kelly's website or from the site here. Do you have a question? Okay, I'm sorry. So what let me see if there's first, no. What we did, we have objects that are sometimes just a single file, like the flash animation or something like that. That one you can just download, okay? From when you view it and open it, you can download that. Yes, yeah, because it's an SWF file. But anything that includes the images, the text, the video, whatever, those have 2, 5, 20 different files that go together that the browser displays those together as a page, okay? Those, if you just save page as, you might get all of those, but you're not certain of getting those. Probably browser dependent, errors, whatever. So the idea is that we bundle those up behind the scenes and store them as a SCORM package or an IMS package. And what we've done is, if you can click up to go to the icon here, the collections, and then scroll down. No, scroll down. That's okay. Back up here. And just scroll down. So we're going to store all those IMS content packages in a separate collection, okay? So if you click on this now and then scroll down, we have not done this for all. This is a fairly time-consuming process. Sarahi, one of the staff members, is creating a tool that's going to make it easier to bundle these files together and create SCORM and IMS packages. But so you can click on any one of these titles. And you're not going to get any descriptive information here because we've already stored that over here in the learning object description. We give you a pointer to that, and then there'll be a reciprocal pointer back to this object, okay, this package. And so if Vanessa, you click on right here now, then you're going to get a save as for the zip file, okay? You can download that to your desktop. You have to download it to your computer someplace and then upload it into your learning management system or extract it on your computer and play with the files that are there, okay? Okay, let me see. Are there any questions, comments, anything you'd like to see me try to break or find something that's broken? I'm not running a script here. You didn't see me looking at a script. I'm taking my chances here, you know. Although I did get a note from my project coordinator that said, don't go to the asset named blah, blah, blah. So
I've got a quick question. Just a show of hands, how many of you are using Blackboard on your campuses? Okay, so that's the overwhelming majority. Anybody using anything else besides Blackboard? What are y'all using? D2L. I'm sorry? D2L. Okay, D2L, Sakai, Angel. You're switching to Angel in the spring. Okay.
Drag it through soft chalk and convert it to straight HTML.
Well, and I think one of the things that I'm making a note of, and I'm sure Bill's making a note of as well, is, as we said earlier, this is very much a work in progress. Y'all are the guinea pigs with this. So please bear that in mind when you play with it today and play with it back in your offices. And this is why you've got Bill's email, and this is why you'll have my email, because we want as much feedback as possible. So we know what's working, what's not working, what needs to be done to make things easier. One of the things that I've made note of, and I'm sure Bill's made note of too, is that the focus so far has been on getting the content in and working. Now we're looking at how do we create the instructions. And so these are issues that I'm making note of so that we make sure that we've got the appropriate user help up as well when you play with it back in your office and know how to get the stuff onto your computer, get the stuff back onto your learning management system. What other programs might you need to be able to use to run it through to make it work? All of that sort of fun stuff.
And like for instance, with the learning management or the IMS content packages, my desire is to present a metadata record like this that has an icon that says download, okay? And it knows to go over here, grab the IMS content package, and just download it. So you're not, being confused by what we have here as metadata, okay? But part of it is for us to continue kind of refining what we need to show you for the functions, and then try to refine the way we present those and the actions that you can take. Like we're moving more and more to icon-based things on the site to make it easier for you to just click an icon and something happens, rather than lists of text. Okay, but again, we can only go so far before we do a set of usability studies that can then inform some changes, and then do more usability studies. We try out new things, and as we get feedback from. Other questions before I go on? Yes?
This could be somebody put in a comment, but as the database is larger, I'm already under 917 or something.
Right.
And right now, it's only view it, seeing all
Right.
Like on PubMed, where, access that, you can actually do that, it's the title and the abstract.
Right.
Or just the title. Some of them, you get 200 on one. That
Right.
might be helpful here, because it's take a long time to go through 917.
Right.
We have to do basically the title plus the abstract.
Right.
If you're a way that you can only read the title.
Right. Well, in some cases, the titles reflect the structure. Lesson 1, topic 1, something like that, as we look at a higher level thing. But I agree completely that the displays of the information about the object is critical. How we do that, what views we can offer, and I think we have with the new interface tool that we use here gives us a lot of flexibility. And like, for instance, that list of disciplines, subdisciplines, I'd rather see that be, click on expand the ones that I want to look at, collapse it when I go to the next one. Right now, the structure of DSpace, the actual platform, limits us to 3 views of metadata. All of it, a simple item view that's customizable. We can put as much or as little in here, and then that results view. We heard from the focus groups that they'd like to see a little bit of information, like the summary, right up front so they know if that's at all in their area. If the titles are not descriptive, then, the good thing about PubMed and scholarly journal databases is that we're kind of instructed to give good descriptive titles to our scholarly articles so that they indicate what it's about. The topics here, topic names, sometimes do and sometimes don't. Same way with the lessons. So that's been our quandary. But if we could give the users the choice to see how they would like to view the result sets. Give me just the titles, give me title and summary, give me title, summary, and course or discipline so I can disambiguate my search term in terms of what the content is. Is it physics, chemistry, or history? Okay. So again, I don't think there's a right answer to that, and our hope is that we can give the most flexibility of user choice in setting that up. But it's a very important point as far as I'm concerned. Because I don't feel it's in your time or interest to be saying, oh, that looks interesting with just a bit of information, click on and say, oh, that's not what I thought it was going to be, right? So enough information to give you a sense that this might be relevant to you, and instead of having to click all the way through and view it and saying, that's not what I want. So, other comments or questions? Just one last thing that I'm going to show you, and that is that as this system has a way of letting you register for an account. You won't be able to do too much with that unless we give you permissions. All this is access controlled. You get assigned to various groups that have permissions, okay? But as a public user, you can set up an account. Let's see if I can get this one right. I had them set this up for me, or had them set it up yesterday so I could show you a person who is logged in as a registered user without any sort of permissions to get into the back end to change metadata or anything like that. But what you can do is set up your profile, and you can actually subscribe. At least one function is to subscribe to collections if you want to see RSS feeds on new stuff coming in. All right, we've not enabled that. I don't think there's enough here, and we basically bulk loaded everything. There's not going to be much new stuff coming with Kelly's class, except when we get the IMS packages up. The IMS packages. But it's one kind of user interaction to have. We need to have an account set up on there, but for the time being, it's not really going to be active or useful until we get more content and possibly some other features. And the other thing is that I don't know how many features we want to try to plug into this platform. I would rather keep this fairly as it is, as a repository, not as a community building tool, not as a peer review tool, but add those modularly on as we need them, okay? So add the best peer review tool we can find to process and pull that in to work with DSpace. find a, I don't know, some sort of community discussion board product that we can plug in a content management system interface or whatever. Instead of trying to do things, ask this digital repository platform to do things that it was not built to do. We're already trying to do that with even just this application. So I think that that's about all. My time's just, well, a little bit of time. They need a break, don't they? Yes. Okay. I shouldn't look at you. I should ask them. You need a break, don't you? Let me just get back up here. So anyway, I hope this speed through with the background and some of the technical details has been somewhat helpful. Visit our project website. You have the one-page handout that hopefully describes stuff. Don't hesitate to contact me. I'm on email all day long. My delete button works. If I get junk mail, I can leave it. But anything coming from you guys will not be considered junk mail. All right. It'd be great if you take some time. You don't have to fill it out completely. It's not. We're trying that out in part as a usability testing instrument. But I certainly would like to hear any feedback from what you saw today. And obviously, some of you were able to play with it a little bit as you were sitting here. But any sort of, anything that jumps out, you say, Bill, you got to fix this. This is stupid. Or I like that. Do more like that. Those sorts of comments would be with the specific things right now. Than just do more of that would be helpful to us. Any other questions?
Let's take about a 10, 15-minute break. There's tea still in the back. That standpoint, and I'd like class to show them some of the things they could do on it, and then ask them to read it. And
Okay.
To come ready to respond
Okay.
on it.
Anybody else have an idea? Want to share a strategy? Brainstorming. We're just brainstorming. Because the theory is that you could go online, you could grab these things, and then you could use them. So I guess I'm asking you, without having spent more than 10 minutes thinking about it, how might you use it?
Well, there's a section on 1840 songs, and I have a whole section in my lecture right now and on the 1840 election. And I envision grabbing these things and putting them into my PowerPoint slides so that they now hear the songs as well as hearing me talk about this campaign.
Okay. In and make them digital.
The University of Texas, their map collection.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've actually scanned.
Another way that I sometimes use material like this is to post a discussion on it.
Make it available on the home website. Make it available on the home website and then post a discussion question and ask them to discuss it before they come to class.
Okay, so you could use one of these objects or chunks of material and create a discussion question around it. You could post it online and have them prepare. Good. That's like what we're doing here, where we're working and then I'm asking for call out and letting you think and hear other people. Good.
You wish us to bring these back to our institutions
That
and share
Is the goal? Yeah.
Okay, just check.
Yes. Yes.
Share widely.
Careful of what you want. You will surely do it.
No, this is, and direct the emails to me. I may end up regretting saying that, but no, if our goal is to have all of the faculty that want to have access to these materials to use and play with in the way that is going to work best for their courses. So anything that you can do to share this information with colleagues back at your institutions, putting them in contact with me so that I can share that information with them, please do so. We haven't thought about that. Right now, one of the things that we're going to be looking at are different ways that presentations at different conferences, different ways through other webcasts that we can get more folks accustomed to this information. Certainly one of the things that we could entertain is if we had a critical mass of faculty in one place, we could certainly entertain. I'm sorry? Not this year, but we are looking at that as a possibility for next year.
I was thinking maybe like a cruise. You know how they do those topic cruises? And the coordinating board would pay for everything. Wait, I was being recorded, wasn't I?
What education body did a cruise?
I don't know.
It wasn't students. It was like, I'm not, never mind. Somebody did.
Okay, I'm gonna say one last thing really about course design and the approach we take at UNT. If you were a part of our project, you would spend an entire year rethinking how you would teach your course. And to do that, you would have received a $12,000 grant, and it would buy out some time for you. And you would have other folks in other disciplines working together with you as a community of practice, plus a full support staff. And I know that most of your institutions are not supporting you in that way. But on the flip of that, most of your institutions are also asking you to write student learning outcomes and linking them with specific assessments in the classroom. And that's part of what our project does. On the first sheet that we looked at today that had the 2 questions at the bottom, that's called Next Generation Course Redesign. There's a second sheet with that, and you'll see that we believe that course design, course redesign, is an iterative process. And the thing that we start out with is student learning outcomes. And then we move through and we have faculty write student learning outcomes for their specific course that are measurable. Because that, you have this idea of what you want students to know and to be able to do. It may be content specific and it may also be higher. But the only way you know that you're doing that is by measuring them. And that's what your outcomes-based assessment is. We talk about course structure. We've done some of that today. How do you decide what to teach, what to leave out? We also talk about structure in terms of, is this a fully face-to-face class? Is it an online class? Is it a blended class? We talk about experiential teaching strategies. That's active learning. Learning by doing things, not just listening to content, but doing things with the content. And then you'll see that there you have outcomes-based assessment again. You're constantly assessing the students, their performance, but also how the teaching strategies are working. Because if the strategy didn't work, and it might not. This morning we had a lot of technical problems. If you discover that, you may say, well, this strategy doesn't work for me, for these students. You're going to assess that and redesign it. That's why it's an iterative process. And that's the next one, data-driven instructional decisions. You make decisions based on evidence. Just like we do within our field, you do it with teaching also. So when Vanessa talked about the scholarship of teaching and learning, it's really this process. And then writing about it, sharing the teaching process at conferences. It's obvious to me that you're all interested in teaching because you're here. And there has been a big push in the last 3 to 5 years to make teaching a scholarly process, much like our specific disciplines. If you want to know more about our project or how it works, we have a website. It's qep.unt.edu. And when you go on there, you will see that so far there have been 5 cohorts of faculty, 5 groups representing 5 years of this project. Blended Learning 1 and 2 and QEP 1, 2, and 3. And they cross all disciplines. So there's not just history, both U.S. History 1 and U.S. History 2. Elizabeth Hayes-Turner is a part of that U.S. History 2 project, and she's teaching her redesign course right now for the first time. But there is world literature. This semester we have a organic chemistry class going through. There's basic algebra. We have art appreciation. So you can find all different kinds of strategies. The common connection for all of these courses in the course design is active learning. All these people are taking their courses and finding a way to make them active. It's QEP, and that stands for Quality Enhancement Plan. We're fulfilling our SEX mandate. .unt.edu. And we actually use this as a marketing tool for students. We tell them that they will get a small liberal arts experience at our large state university. Question? Sorry. For like a teaching portfolio? Like a specific rubric or something that you would use? Some of the classes do use portfolios. Yes. I think Robin is going to talk about bigger assessment issues.
Real quickly, is there anyone that didn't, Robin, would you hand me that set right there? Is there anyone that didn't get a chance to fill out the Learning Objects Repository version 2 feedback survey that Bill handed out earlier today? Okay. Just want to make sure everybody has one. All right. Robin Zuniga is one of our head assessment and evaluation folks here at the coordinating board. She's going to spend a little bit of time talking about evaluation assessment of today's workshop. As I said, we would like to start doing this with course material being available that they're going to.
There it goes. I hope you can hear me. Yes, I am responsible for not only this workshop, but for evaluating the course redesign process in general. We have funded a number of projects across the state, as you may know, in different subject matters for course redesign, and this is the first workshop that we've had. So as Vanessa said, we want really good feedback from you, and thoughtful feedback, not just criticism, but we want you to really think about it. So there's two things in the middle of the table to facilitate the evaluation for the session. And first you'll see there's this is hard. Hold on. Does that work? There. Okay. I'm going to have you do a little creative evaluation process. In the middle of your table, there's a single sheet of paper that says group evaluation. A set tradition. I want you to do evaluation. Yeah. Thanks. I want you to select one person at your table as the recorder and give them this sheet of paper. And then I want you to look at the 3 questions that we have, and I'll go over them in a second. They're very clear, very simple questions. But I want you to, in contrast to the way we usually do evaluations, I want you to discuss them and decide on your answer as a group. In fact, I want you to try to come up with a consensus about your answer, which means that you really have to discuss what you got out of it so that you have a chance to really banter back and think about your answers to the questions. And then I want you to put the answer that you come up with as a group on this paper. The recorder is responsible for that, and you'll give it to me. Now, maybe you can't come up with a consensus. I'm not going to keep you here all night getting you to come up with a consensus. You have a, the Supreme Court just went into session, so if you have a, what do they call it, a consenting opinion? Dissenting opinion? Yes, dissenting opinion. Please feel free to go ahead and include that if you can't come to a consensus. But I want you to talk about it. I don't want you to just write down. Usually we just write in, okay, I liked it, I didn't like it. I want you to talk a little bit more about what you got out of it. So go on to the next one. I just want to go over the questions. They're really easy. Important thing about the learning. What's the most important thing you learn this learning repository? And then what can we do differently? How do we make, talking about doing another one in the spring for a different subject matter, a different discipline? What can we do that might make it work better from your perspective as a faculty member and learning about course redesign, learning about what's available in the learning repository and how to use it? And then when you finish that task, would you please individually fill out this other evaluation? You should be enough of these in the center of the table for each of you. I tried to check and make sure I had enough for everybody at the table. And this will give us your individual responses to specific things that happened today so we can make adjustments in the future. I also would ask you, we have your email address, and I just want you to be aware that we will be following up with you over time, because we want to see how this has impacted your teaching. Have you used any of it? You know, you may not use it this semester. I wouldn't expect that, but maybe next semester. So I hope that you will be open when you hear from us to responding and giving us feedback and working with us on collecting more data about how your students respond to the various pieces that you might pull from the learning repository, what pieces you actually use from the redesign in your course. You may only use parts of it. Some of the concepts from it. You know, I don't expect everybody to just wholeheartedly adapt the redesign. So there's going to be different versions of it. So if, while you're doing that, one of the things that Vanessa just said, things that would help us, if you're really going to engage actively in redesigning your course and thinking about this redesign as a model for that, if you could keep track of your thinking about that, because we may actually come to you when we're doing follow-up and do a case study on what you have done to adopt the redesign. So if you can keep a journal or a record of what you have done and your thoughts and observations, that would be very useful to us. So I'm not going to ask you to report on your results, but I would like you, as at each table, to decide on your group questions. So you can take as long as you want, but I'm sure you don't want to take more than about, we're supposed to be out of here by 4, so that only gives you 35 minutes, and I'm sure a lot of you would like to get out of here sooner. And as soon as you're done with the group session, if you'd fill out the individual ones and hand them to me, you're free to go.
Well, and actually, one other thing. Please, again, on the LOR version 2 feedback, if you would fill this out as well and drop this off with either Bill or I. It's your initial feedback. As much of that as you can give us right now would be great. If you don't feel like that you had enough time to play around with it and can't fill it out completely, you know, feel free to email us your comments down the road. And I just want to say one last thing before you work on and get ready to go. I started off this morning by saying that, you know, the course redesign projects are in no way an attempt to tell faculty what and how they should teach. And I want to reiterate that. You would be hard-pressed to find somebody who believes in the sacredness of academic freedom more than I do. We think that these are wonderful tools. In some cases, they're going to be very appropriate to use. In some cases, they may not be. There are pieces that may work really well for you. There are pieces that may not, pieces that may work great for your colleagues. Our goal here has been to encourage the creation of course content that can be used in a number of different ways around the state. How it gets used and how effective it is what we're now putting in your hands, so we can begin to get a sense of that. I said at the beginning this morning I thanked you, and I'm going to thank you again. And the folks in the room that know me know that I'm saying this in all honesty, in all sincerity. I remember what it's like to stand up in front of a classroom of students at 8 o'clock in the morning who aren't really keen on U.S. history. And I know sometimes the sort of looks that you get. And I know oftentimes you don't get thanked. And if nothing else, I want to end today by thanking you again, because the job that you do, I think, is one of the hardest jobs that there is. And if your students don't thank you, at least let me thank you for doing that and for doing it well and for caring, because sometimes it's really hard when you're getting the blank look and the folks that are dozing off at their desk. So, thank you.